Okay. So Hayoim Shmoina ve'esrim Yoim shehem arba shavuos loimer. Today is day 28 of the Omer. Okay, Gavaldi. And I believe today is Yud Gimel Iyar, right? Because tomorrow is Pesach Sheni. So again, we're learning about people who transport barrels around. If they're not Posheya, they're potter. If the barrel gets damaged. In one pshat, we actually said it will be a machloikis, tanoim, if he's potter or not. Because if you hold, like Reb Meir and Bava Kama, that niskal is Posheya, you should be chayiv. But we had another pshat on Amar Aleph, on Pegimel Amar Aleph, that even if niskal is Posheya, the Chazal made a special takana to pater someone who is moving barrels around from being liable if the barrel breaks, even due to a niskal Posheya, because otherwise you'd never be able to find anybody to work in shipping and receiving. And that would hurt business. And for that reason, they said that as long as the person swears that he didn't do it on purpose, that will be good enough. And we will not force him to pay. And that was the two pshatim we had. And that's where we left off yesterday. You see how the Rabbanan have a keen concern to keep business going. Hahu gavra, to have a kama aber chavisa de chamra. I hear to support the establishment. Hu gavra, to have a kama aber chavisa de chamra, aristika de mechuza. There was somebody that was hired to move a barrel of wine. The Ristika de Mechuza, Rash's Rachva, the open area, the plaza of the city of Mechuza, and the Tavra Beziza de Mechuza. In Mechuza, it was the norm for people to build homes with cantilevered beams, meaning the beams of their second floor wouldn't stop at the exterior partition. It would stick out past the exterior partition and create like a platform for a porch if you wanted to make on it. So when you would walk by a wall, there would be beams sticking out of the wall above your head. If you're my height, and if you're very tall, you might bang your head. And it's exactly that the barrel hit and broke. The Tavra Beziza de Mechuza. And it broke because it hit one of those cantilevered beams. Also, the Kamei de Rav. Amarle Rav Paskind, Rizkaha de Mechuza, Shchichi Ba'inchi. It's the main plaza of Mechuza. It's impossible that there's no witness. Nobody has it on their security camera. It's impossible. You can't bring proof of what happened to prove that, in fact, it was an oinus. Zil Isi Raya, bring a Raya, in fact, that this is what occurred. The iftar, and then I will let you off. Then you'll be potter. Now you need Adam. Amalei Rabbi Yosef Perez, Rabbi Yosef, the son of Rava, asked him, where did you get this idea that you don't believe him with a shvuah? Come on, Isi. Are you following the sheet of Isi, who we quoted earlier, where it says, in the pasuk, Ein roya, then shvuas Hashem tia ben shteyam. But if there's witnesses that are available, avada, you have to bring a witness. Amalei in, Rava said that's exactly what I'm passing like Isi. Ushvir long kavasa, and we pass like him. Who gavri to Amal Chavre, Zil Zovan Li, Arba Meya Dani Dechamra. He gave his friend money and he said, I want you to purchase on my behalf 400 jugs or barrels of wine. Ozal Zovan Li. He comes back and he says, I'm reporting to you that I purchased the 400 barrels with your money. Also, he went. I'm sorry. So he went and bought it. Then he came back to report. I did purchase all the barrels of wine on your behalf. The problem is, they all went bad. So I have nothing to show you. Also, so they went to Rava for Din Torah. Does this shliach have to pay? Omar he told him, Arba Meya Dani Chamra Tekifi. If a person has a lot of 400 barrels, that's a lot of barrels. A lot with the pun intended, in both meaning of the word, that's something that wouldn't happen quietly. That would make front page news. Kala Isla. That would generate a lot of buzz. And it would generate so much buzz they would be accurate information, easily verifiable, as Rashi says, Emasech mitu, exactly when did these barrels go bad, the Eitzel mihayu, and who were these barrels by, when they went bad, Bishal mihayu, and who owned these barrels that went bad. And what we're concerned is, Shemesh alachayu, maybe you never purchased any barrels on behalf of the fellow who gave you money. Maybe you had in your warehouse the whole time barrels that were vinegar, and you scammed this guy, and you told him that these were the barrels that you bought for him. Or maybe he gave you $10,000 to buy wine, and you used 2,000 of it to buy vinegar, and then you're telling him that you spent all his money. Therefore, since I know the rumors will give us, or the coil, not rumors, the coil will give us accurate information and tell us whose barrels became choimetz, when they became choimetz, it will become clear to us. Therefore, zil isi raya, you need to bring edim the meikara ki mizavnus lahu. When you first purchased this lot of wine, chamra ma'al yahava, it was good wine, and it became bad. Then the iftar, then you will be pater from pain. Amalei Rabbi Yosef, come on, ki isi. Once again, are you passing like Isi, who says that when it's Isi to bring Edim, we don't let you get away with swearing. Amalayin Isi, that's right. That's exactly who I paskin like. Ushavir long kavasei, we paskin like Isi. Asking Reb Chia bar Yosef b'Sichra. Reb Chia bar Yosef paskin in the city of Sichra. There's different types of tools that people use to carry. The simplest tool that people use to carry is a board or a beam that goes across your shoulders from right to left. And then from each end of the board, you can hang a barrel of wine. This way you get up in between and you lift it up on your shoulders, you're lifting 2 barrels of wine. But sometimes 2 barrels of wine are a bit heavy for one person. So hani de dori ba'agra. If you're schlepping using this agra, which is the mechanism that I just described, it's a board that goes across your back, and on either end of it, your parcel is hanging, the itbar, and then those barrels broke, nishalim palga. I'm going to be mechayev this porter 50%. Why? My timer, nafish lachat. The truth of the matter is, the weight on that bracket is a bit much for one person to carry. So maybe he shouldn't have carried it by himself. But with Zuter Latre, it's also not thank you so much. It's also not enough weight for 2 people. Because Rashi either for 2 people or for 2 trips, it's not enough. So it will be a waste of resources to either get 2 people involved or to go back and forth twice and do 2 deliveries. So therefore, it's Karav L'Oiners of a Karav L'Pshia. It's sort of in the middle between should he or shouldn't he, and therefore he made a takana that you pay half. Okay. However, but Digla Rashi describes a very interesting type of way to carry. It sounds like it's a long stick that at the end of it has a fork. So let's say it's a 5-foot stick, and at the end of it there's a fork that maybe each fork is, let's say, 2 or 3 feet. And you used to put the stick up against your neck. So the fork was up against your neck, and the 2 forks would stick out behind you. You would tie 2 heavy things to those 2 forks, but that had a higher weight capacity. That was way heavier. And if you would get very tired, you would just lean your chin down, and now the weight would be supported by the stick. And then when you're ready to walk again, you lift up, and now it's suspended on your shoulders. That's how I understood it from Rashi. I was not able to find a picture online to describe this particular lifting method. But whatever it is, it's made for much heavier weights. So bedigla mishalam kula, because that was clearly way too heavy for you, and we considered pshia, and if it breaks, you have to pay in full. Rabba bar bar Chana. This is a very, very fascinating Gemara, the Gemara with which we're going to, Bez Hashem, finish the parak of Hasoy Chashomim. Rabba bar bar Chana hired porters to move barrels of wine for him. And Tavrule, Hanishu Kaloi, Chavisa de Chamra. They broke it. Now, he felt that they should be liable because Niskal Paishaya. So you know what he did? he needed some way to protect himself in collecting, because who knows what the guy will be able to pay. So Shakol Liglimayu, he seized their coats. He seized their coat, so at least he could get some of his money back by liquidating the coat. Amr Rav, they went to Rav, and the porter went to Rav to complain that Rabbi Bar Chanan took our coat. Amr, he told Rabbi Bar Chanan, Havlu Glimayu, give them their coats back. Amr so Rabbi Bar Chanan says, I don't understand. Dina Hachi, is this halacha? They damaged me. Am I not entitled to seize their property to compensate for my damage? Amalei, that is the halacha. You're not allowed to seize it. Why? You have to go in the right way, and Rashi says, "Lefnimi shur sadin." So this is, of course, very, it's very mechudesh. It's very surprising that there's a chiv min adin, the bezin will pass min adin, that you have to do lefnimi shur sadin.
Who's asking the Charlotte for you?
I hear. Yoiv lu glimayu, but listen, it gets worse. So we gave them their begging. Amalei, they told him, but he didn't pay us. Aniyanan, we're poor. V'tarchinan kulo yoyme. We busted ourselves all day, and now the barrel's broke. What can we do? V'kafinan, we're hungry. V'les lon miti, and we have nothing to eat. Amalei, so Rav told Rabbi Bar Chanan, zil have girayu. You have to pay them as well. Amalei, so Rabbi Bar Chanan told Dina Hachi, is that halacha? Amalei, yes, because it says va'archos tzadikim tishmor, which means you even have to help them. So this is very, very puzzling. But the Pashut Pshat, according to Rashi, is clearly that there are times where there's a chiv. I don't know when you can apply it, but there's a time where there's a chiv and din to do a flimishur sadin. But Moshe Feinstein actually brings a raya from this Gemara to something else, and he says this is not lefnimishur sadin over here. This was all a din of tzedakah. So he didn't force Rabbi Bar Chanan to pay because it's lefnimishur sadin. Forced him to pay is because it was clearly acknowledged that these people were very poor. So he was just mechayif him to give tzedakah. Maybe he wouldn't have been mechayif him. He wasn't in a position. But the Marsha has a different shot that makes it so much easier to understand. I don't want to say it over wrong. It's a small Marsha. The next couple of days, there's a lot of Marshals involved because it's very interesting. I got it to Gemara. So let's just quickly look at the Marsha over here. Pirish Rashi, the Iri de Tavri Pshia. It was a Pshia. Right, and therefore Rabba Bar Chanan should not have had to pay, and therefore it's only Lefnimi Shur Sadin that he was commanded to pay by Rab. But Oid Pirish, Seifa de Krohu. He also said that the pasuk that says Archas Tzadikim Tishmar is the end of the pasuk of Laman Telach B'derech Tayv. The Ikra Achinahu, if it was a different pasuk, how would you be able to say that it's referring to actually paying them? Matin Lamemer, the Archas Tzadikim Tishmar is also Litin Lahem Glimayu Shaloi Avsidu Mamun Atzma. But who said that the pasuk means that you have to pay them too? Of a Litin Lahem Oitz Char Tircha Mikisoi Lo have a mashma. But now that it's the same pasuk, it's a continuation of the same pasuk, it's obviously creating more and more chiyuvim on Rabba Bar Chanan. Malash to keep in the ratio to krel man telech b'derech toivim. Nami mashma shalo yafsidu mamen atzman. Al korchach seifo dekra evorchas tzadikim is lasufeba to add additional responsibilities on Rabba Bar Chanan the litin lahem gam schar tircha. He has to pay them as well. But the Marsha has a different shot that makes it much easier to understand for me. The lav b'pshia have a tavri l'chavos. It was not a pshia. It was talking not a pshia. The rabba the shakol limayu. It was a niskal. It was a niskal, and it's this machlokas we had if niskal is posheya or not. And the rabba who sees their beged savar the niskal posheya who Reb Meir. Rabba held like Reb Meir in Bava Kama that said niskal posheya. The amalei Rav and Rav said, I'm sorry. L'man terlich b'derech toivim. V'ata hoylechas hoylachta oisam b'derech lo toiv b'mochem edron. L'man derech b'yachtovim is when you hire employees to move stuff for you. Make sure you give them a route that's going to be straight and smooth. You sent them on a bad route. If you send them on a bad route, and because of that the barrels break, that's hardly a posheya. The niska laf posheya who kidaloyo. So it was a mokum medrin, and the Gemara held there it would be niska laf posheya, which was the tiny that Rabbi Eliezer had under Beir. I don't know what Rabbi Meir is talking about. So now it's already beautiful. It makes sense. It's in Dini Paskin. Because the machloikas was if niskal posheya or niskal laf posheya. That I don't know. They were very poetic in those days.
And that's not how the case was presented, though.
That's right. That's right. Under cross-examination, more facts always come out.
Well, did they, or did he say it's probably under these circumstances, not those circumstances?
That wouldn't really be psak. I can't speculate.
You would expect the Gemara to say that, not the
Marsha.
Yeah.
I hear. Havlen agrayu shel torach haderech. You also you have to pay not the salary, but shel torach haderech. Even the law of poishim, since they're not poishim, I guess is torach means for schlepping it where they schlepped it to. You have to pay them for that as well. So behind the orchas adich meaning so hapach poishim kedichsiv tzadikim yelchabam who poishim yikashlubam. These were people who went good, who went smooth. It wasn't their fault, and therefore they have to be paid. So it's an interesting twist. I don't know if any Rishonim learn like the Marsha, but this is the Marsha's pshat. Clearly not consistent with how Rashi learned, but a very interesting perspective. Okay, Baruch Hashem, we were zoicha to finish hasoiches omnen, Billy Nader hadin Allah hasoiches omnen, hadin Allah hasoiches omnen, hadin Allah hasoiches omnen. You know,
in their pasuk,
I'm sorry.
In their pasuk that says you have to paskin correctly and not look at the person whether he's rich or poor. That's right.
Right. Right. So it's a balance, and that's why they say the two times where we always wait for the Rav is by Emes after Krishma and by Shalom after Shmoneh Esrei, because only the Rav knows when to balance Emes and Shalom. Because sometimes you have to compromise one for the other. Okay. Pay is payday. Here it took us, we're getting payday a little late. After busting ourselves for 83 blot, we're now going to have a little bit of a break, and we're going to have some agadita, which actually 82 blot, because daf pay is skipped. I'm sorry, daf aleph is skipped. People hire workers. And remember, we learned that poilim have a connotation of hourly. And he told them, I want you to start earlier than people normally start, and I want you to work later than people normally work. Now, in those days, they didn't work 9 to 5. In those days, work hours were daybreak to dusk, or maybe even to nightfall. They really worked in those days. It wasn't like nowadays where we only work a third of a day. There they worked a whole day, but of course, in the winter, they worked less hours than they worked in the summer. So they only worked during light hours because they didn't have electricity. Electricity allows us to work in different hours. So now what is the definition of hashkem al arif? I think we're going to see soon. But in the place where the minig was not to do that, in a racial akleif, can't force them. Now hashkem al arif means, let's say Nets is doing the work day starts. So does that mean you leave to work at Nets? Does that mean you have to be at work already at Nets? Let's say the day ends when at dusk. Does that mean you should be home by dusk? Or does that mean you leave work at dusk? But there was no overtime pay. Those are the contracts. Right? But the Gemara is going to discuss overtime pay. The Gemara is going to discuss it. So you're the expert over here. You're the expert in this over.
My worker did a partner taking the road.
If the minig was that you would supply your workers with lunch, with food, you have to. Lasafik b'mesipa, mesika, to give them, Rashi calls it lifton. It was something that they ate together with the bread, I guess. Is that what he calls it? Relish? Okay. Yisafik. Hakol kaminig avadina. It all depends on what the labor law says in your province. Did we have this story before several times? So Amar Levno, he told the son, say schor lanu poyal. Go and hire workers for us. Halach upasak lehem mezainos. He went, he made a deal with them to work for him, and he also told them that we're going to provide lunch. When he came back to his father to report that he successfully recruited a team, Amar loy b'ni, did you mess me up? Afilu imata oisa lehem kesuda shloima b'shaitoi. Even if you promise to serve them meals like Shloima Melach in his greatest of times, in his glory, served huge meals, still a yotas yidei chayvascha iman. You will not be fulfilling your obligation to them. You know why? Because their norm that they're entitled to is a lot more than even that. Shehem b'nei Avram, Yitzchak v'Yaakov, who had even greater sudas. Avram used to make a major party for every meal. Ella, before they start to work, make sure to tell them, and if you remember at the beginning of the Gemara, how could you back out? The Gemara said because they know he's not really able to bind his father, and we only say that for sure that the father knows about it and agreed once they already started working. But until they started working, they themselves didn't even feel that the contract was valid. He wouldn't have had to speak that out because if he said bezoinus, he means what every other normal employer gives. It would never have been the chayivim this obscene amount. It's poshut that you can't force them to work early and late. As Duvi asked, he paid them more than the going rate. Let's say the going rate was to pay somebody $100 a day, and he was offering to pay them $120 a day. So you could tell them, why do you think I'm paying you $120 a day? Because I have money to burn? I can get anywhere and employ for $100 a day. The employer can say, that I paid you more, you should have figured it out. Because you were going to start working earlier and you were going to work later. And that's why you were getting paid more. Kamash Malon, the Amrulay, they'll tell him, no. Hi, the toughest long. We thought, you know why you paid us more? Because you wanted us to have great morale and give it our all. Should the Rishonim discuss? What if after the job is done, they do an inspection and the avoid is not a vidita shapir? Can he say you have to pay it back? No, the answer is they can say, no, this was our best. This was our best. So if you want them to work extra hours, you need to be very, very clear. What's that?
The references.
You should have got references. That's right. See, they needed a good human resources consultant like Duvi. This wouldn't happen. If you would be around then we would lose 2 full prokim in Meseches Bava Metzia. Okay. Amar Rishlakish said, and now let's turn on to Amud Beis. Hoyel, a daily worker. Bichnisasoi, when he's coming in and he's wrapping it up at the end of the day, Mishaloi. That is on his own time. Meaning, you have to work until dark. After dark is when you pack it in and you go home. But when you leave to work, Mishal Balabais. That's on the employer's time, meaning if the day starts at Nets, then you leave your house at Nets and you get to work whenever you get to work. Toshvis has a long Toshvis here. He has another shot that maybe it's exactly the opposite. Shenemar, it says in the pasuk, Tizrach Hashem Eshiyah Sefer. It's talking about the critters that roam the jungle all night. Tizrach Hashemesh, when the sun shines, Yosefin, they gather into their lairs. Vel on your button, and they go lie in their lairs. And then the pasuk continues, that at that time where the animals are going in, at Netzachama, Yetze Adam Lepa'aloi, that's when a person goes out to work, V'lavedasai, and to his work, at the hour until the night. So you see from the Torah that what is the right time to go to work? At Netz is when you leave to work. Why don't you see what the minig was in that city when they start, when people in that city start? Why are you going back to a pasuk? Go see what the minig is. They just set up a new encampment, and there was no custom. Sorry, And there are new square, there's a new fountain, there are new fees. Yeah, that's right. Or maybe in New Orleans, or New York, right? New Jersey, yeah. The nexi mehecha ka'asu. Why don't you see this people, this group of people? What city did they come from, and how did people fear in that city? It's speaking about a new community that there's people from many different places that all gathered for this new area. Like you go to Lakewood, to a new development, you're gonna have people that are from Borough Park, and from Williamsburg, and from Toronto, from Denver, and from Baltimore, and they have one big together, and then they fight all day. Should they daven Sfard or Ashkenaz in the shul? What's that? Margaret, that's right. Tachna, the Nishtachna, that's right. Hallel, the Nishtachna, Iboy Sema, or actually you could say, the Amalahu, the Agrisuli Kipoil Dairaisa. When I hired you, I said, I'm hiring you based on the Dairaisa terms. So then we have to go look at the Psukim to tell us when the job starts, when the workday starts. It says in the pasuk, Tashes Choshech, the darkness will set in, the Yehi Laila, and it'll become dark. Going back to the psukim that we referenced a little bit earlier, Boy Tirmois Kol Chai Sayar. At night is when the creatures of the night, the dangerous predators, start to roam around. Tashes Choshech V'Loy, the Gemara Darshans. Zeh Ha'olam Hazeh. Darkness is what we compare Olam Hazeh to. We compare Olam Hazeh to darkness. Why? It's like darkness. Boy termois. We don't see a clear gili of the Rebbeinu Shalom. Boy termois kachai sayar. Who are the dangerous creatures roaming around in Olam Hazeh? Elu Rishoyim Shaboy. These are the Rishoyim of Rashi. Shemanichen lahen yechaylas lahalach berisham. In this world, the Rebbeinu Shalom gives them bechira and gives them the ability to continue in their path of riches. The ein front man, and they're not punished in Olam Hazeh, and that's why they're called the Chayes Hayar. Elu Shem Shaboy Shadoyim L'Chayes Shabiyar. But Tizrach Hashemet Sheyaseifun, when the sun shines, you learn Pasuk from the Pasuk, the animals pack it in, they go and hide. Yalmai Your Botun. We dash in that a little differently. Tizrach Hashemesh l'tzadikim la'osid lavoi. The sun is going to shine on behalf of the tzadikim who did mitzvahs all the time, and Yesayfin is going on the Rishoyim. Yesayfin Rishoyim leGehenim. The Rishoyim are going to be gathered in to Gehenim. Ve'al ma'idasam your bottom, and until their dwelling, they will lie. Ein loch called tzadik v'tzadik. Every person is going to have a dwelling in Adam Abba according to the way he deserves. That could be a little bit scary. Adam a person goes out to work. Yotzu tzadikim lekabel scharim. That means the tzadikim lasid lavai are going to go receive their schar. You know who's going to get schar? Somebody who worked to do mitzvahs, to avoid Hashem, every day of his life until the very end. He used every day of his life. He used that every day of his life to do mitzvahs. He's going to get payback big time. Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon, it's the season for him now, because Reb Shimon Bar Yochai was his father, and he's a very famous guy. He lived in the cave for many, many years, right? You would think if he lived in the cave, he was scrawny. We're soon going to see Rabbi Elazar Bar Shimon was a Kadai Nahari. And the Gemara is going to give us maybe TMI about him. Yeah, that's what it's going to talk about. Too much information. Bava did not. Every word of the Gemara is precious, but we'll soon see if we get on Talmud Aleph. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, Ashkach, Lahu Paraguna. He found a Paraguna. What's a Paraguna? That is Rashi's Mamuna Shal Melech. He works for the king. And you know what his job was? He was a police. His job was to seek out crime and pull criminals off the street. The Katavas Ganvi. That was his job. Amr Lay, so Rabbi Elazar B'Shimon walked up to them and said, Heichi yochot luhu. How in the world are you going to be able to understand who the Gnavim are? Lav kechiyusa matili? Aren't they compared in the Torah to chayos? Like Rashi, Meschabois Bayoim, the Mr. Ayim. You're looking around by day for goyim, for crooks who operate primarily at night. How are you going to find them? Which we explained earlier is referring to Rishoyim. Or there are those who say he asked him from the other pasuk of Yera b'mister ka'aryeh b'sukkoi. They ambush in hiding like a lion who ambushes out of his shelter, out of his concealment, out of the area where he's not recognized. And since it's so hard to recognize who the Ganav is, Dil Mishaklis Tzadiki B'Shavkis Rishi. How do you know you're not taking and condemning tzaddikim and leaving the Rishayim on the street? Obviously, their justice system didn't consider an accused innocent until proven guilty. When he chapped somebody, they punished him. Amr Lay, so this officer told him, Umay Eved, what am I supposed to do? Harmona de Malkahu. I have to do it. Mitzvah Melchi. I have no choice. That's my job. If I come up empty-handed every day, I'm going to be in trouble. Omar, he said, Ta agmaracha hechitabed. Let me teach you how you can identify a crook. This is what you should do. Oil ba'ar b'shoy lechanusa. Go to all the breakfast restaurants 4 hours in the day, 11 a.m. Go in at 11 a.m. and look at who's sitting in the restaurants. If you see someone who's drinking wine in the morning, enjoying his morning meal, and he's holding a kosh in his hand, but he's so exhausted, he's literally falling asleep over his food at 11 a.m. He's a person you should focus on and you should investigate. Ask about him, who this fellow is. If he's a choshev Talmid Chacham, v'nayim, and he's sleeping, that's because he was probably learning all night, and he has a legitimate reason why he is so tired now. If he's a regular day shift worker, again, this is his late morning, it's his mid-morning break. He woke up very early to go to work. He's entitled to be a little tired. And if you find that he works at night, now what do you mean he works at night? How could someone work at night? You would hear noise banging in a blacksmith shop. But if he is an employee who makes metal or gold or silver threads, the way that was done was they would pour molten gold over a screen, and then the gold would drip down, and then they would use progressively smaller screens up until they got that thread. But that's a pretty silent type of malacha. So that would be a good alibi that he worked all night, because that's the type of work that if he did, no one would hear it. But Viloy, if he doesn't have any one of these explanations as to why he's so tired at his morning meal, his mid-morning meal, Ganvahu, you can assume he was just up to no good last night, busy stealing from people and robbing people. The Tafsei chapim. So now this guy ended up being a real sharp shooter and expert in identifying only the criminals. So they asked him in his office, how did you become so keen on knowing who exactly was guilty and who's not?
It's also possible that he's a Talmid Chacham and he works late at night. He's got an HVAC and he has to give Daf Yomi.
They said, why do we need you? Let's go straight to Rabbi Elazar B'Shimon. Let him be our policeman. The person who announced the decree, he should be the one to carry out the decree. The Sefer from the Stipler, they printed a lot of his letters. It's called Karyana de Igrasa. The person who announced the takana, he brought to us the information. Let him be the one to fear those. So Asuyala Rabbi Elazar B'Shimon, they appointed the Malchus appointed Rabbi Elazar B'Shimon to be the policeman. The Katafas Ganva, he was Chapm Ganavim, left, right, and center. He was an expert. They could have made a television show about him. because there's so many television shows about these expert detectives. They could have called instead of calling it Kojak, they could have or Starsky and Hutch. They could have called it Rabbi Elazar Bar Shimon, and there would have been a perfect record of always getting his man. So what happened? What happened was, Shalach le Rabbi Shua ben Karcha wasn't so pleased that he was locking up a lot of Jews. Funny how there were some Jews that were also caught up in this net. I wonder how that was possible. So they would call him Chaymitz ben Yayin. Your father is a special man. He's a tzaddik, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. But you're a Chaymitz. You went bad. How is it? Chaymitz ben Yayin. Ad Masay at the Moiser Amoy Shel Elokeinu Lariga. How long are you going to continue being Moiser? Klal Yisrael Yiddish Kindalach to get killed. Sholach he sent them back. Don't worry about it. Putzim ani mechalim and akarim. I'm just getting rid of bad weeds. They're all guilty. They're all deserving of the death. And for Keret, I'm going to improve Klal Yisrael as a result. Long Marshal on this. Sholach lei. So they sent him back. Hashem doesn't need your help in cleaning up his nation. Yovei balakerim v'yechala es koitz. So you could see that Rabbi Elazar Bar Shimon got a lot of pushback on his job. Yom Echad, one day, there was this washer, a low person, a simple person in the community, and he called out to Rabbi Elazar Bar Shimon, Karya Chaymitz b'yayin. Rabbi Elazar Bar Shimon was taken aback that this simple person should call him such a horrible name. Amar, he said to me, the chatz of kula ai, since this guy is such gall, Shemami na Rishiu. He must be a Russia. Amalu, he told his people, Tafsu, grab him. Tafsu, they grabbed him. But he didn't pass the sniff test of falling asleep over his breakfast. It's only because he was a mechutzav to him. After Rabbi Elazar Bar Shimon calmed down, Ozil Basrai Lefruka, he felt very bad. Maybe that he's condemning somebody who doesn't deserve to be condemned. So he quickly ran to bail him out, to redeem him. And he wasn't able to. Kari alei, he said on himself. Rashi says he said on the koives. So it's a shaila how to learn this line. Shomer pivu l'shoinoi, shomer mitaris nafshi. So Rashi learns this idiot opened his big mouth. Had he not opened his big mouth, he wouldn't have been caught by me. But the Mashar brings down people who learn that he said it about himself. I talked too soon, and now I have tsaris. Now I might be killing an innocent person. Zakvu, they hung the guy. I guess he wasn't dead yet, but they hung him. So Kam Tuzas Kifa, he stood underneath the tree that this criminal was hanging from. The Kabachi and Rabbi Elazar Bar Shimon was crying. So Amrulay, they told him. Now Pashut means the guy was dead, and other people told him, but I heard a pshat that maybe the person convicted himself was still alive, and he said, Rebbe, Al Necha, don't feel bad. This guy's a bad guy. Shahu Ubanoi, Bolu Naira Murasa b'Yom Kippur. Him and his son were boiled a Naira Murasa b'Yom Kippur. It's funny, whenever the Gemara wants to give an example of a real bad guy, it always talks about being boiled an Arusa, or being boiled a Basula on Yom Kippur. The Gemara talks about a city that had to be condemned because there was a lot of people that were boiled on Yom Kippur. Somehow that's the example of like the ultimate in evil. 364. Right. Oh, so if Yisrael Bernstein asked the kasha, what do you mean by Yom Kippurim? How is it possible if the Yitzhar is not shoylet on Yom Kippur? So how is it possible that he would be boiled on Yom Kippur? I just know Yitzhar. He himself was doing it already. Oh, so Chaim Fier's answer. I didn't have a chance to listen to his teretz. I only listened to half of his drusha. So
what's his time?
So Chaim says the teretz is they were so bad that they need the Yitzhar to induce them to do averes. They were already going to do averes on their own. So what did he do? He niach yodoi al b'nei beyav. He put his hand on his stomach.
Who told him? Who told him?
Al Yera. It's a shaila if other people told him or if the victims themselves told him. Amru, he said, Sisu b'nei me'ai. My stomach, you could be very happy. Sisu, be happy. Umas sveka shalakem kach. Here I had a stomach. I wasn't really sure if this guy was guilty. And it turned out my gut feeling, that's what's called a gut feeling. V'adoi shalachem people you're sure are villains, Allah has come of
If the God is mamish to my mind.
So that's right. So the Ben Yoda said, it's hard to accept that just because the guy fell asleep by breakfast one day, that boom, now he's going to be a Ghana. So there's no suffix. I have no suffix, Zok to Ben Yoda, if the Arizal and the Baal Shem was able to look at a Yid and see what he did that day, I have no suffix that Rabbi Elazar Shimon was able to do that just as easily. And Klor, he knew exactly who a person was and what a person was just by looking at him. He had to cloak it in Gashmias, not to advertise that he can see right through a guy. But you can be pretty sure that he knows who the person is before he's condemning. So therefore, since I know you're my b'nei ma'ayim, Shar Dahaibin, mufta chani b'chen. See, now we're starting to get into the kishkes of these tzaddikim. You're not going to ever be able to deteriorate, rot, and decompose. Okay. And even so, he still wasn't happy. He was upset about himself for killing somebody. Now that he said he made it, he wasn't sure. Maybe I'm going to burn again. So he actually wanted a test to see if his intestines were going to decompose. Will his body decompose or not? So you know what they did? They put him to sleep. They gave him anesthesia. By Lula Beita de Shisha, they took him to a marble house. Rashi says, because that's a place where it's very to see if he would rot. The arm told it's marble. I guess it's very clean, like it's a sterile area where the air doesn't get in, like an operation theater. They opened up his belly and have a mafkim and they dekula tarba. They took out baskets of fat. Salim malay mishumin. So we're getting a lot of information about Rabbi Elazar Shimon. He was a takanai. He was like a couple of bells that Rebbe's combined, right? And they put his fat out in baskets in the sun in the summer. They didn't go rot, so they had proof this man's not going to decompose. Fat doesn't rot. It might melt, but it doesn't rot. Yes, pure fat won't rot, but shuraiki sumki, that has little red streaks in it, which are meat, that means there's some meat in it, masriach, those would have rotted, and hacha avlagav, the ika shuraiki sumki, loy masriach. They didn't rot. So he knows that he's going to be okay. Karya nafshe, af bisari yishkoin levetach. Even my basar can rest in peace, because it won't decompose.
Asleep, right?
It's like doing a fat reduction, a liposuction. Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Yosy, and even Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Yosy, Mata Kihai Ma'aseh. A story like this happened to him, meaning the Melech also told him, you're going to be in charge of law enforcement. Pagabe Elio, and he met Elio. Amr Lei, Elio told him, Elio already monded, not a koivis. Ad Mosai Ata Moiser Amoy Shalalakedu Lariga. And Elio told him, I also know who the crooks are. Ich will das auch gekenntin. Why are you doing it? Amr Lei, Maya Hebet, he asked Elio, what should I do? Harmona de Malkahu. Amr Lei, Elio told him, what did your father do when he had a problem with the government? Arak last year, he ran away to Asya. At Arak Lelutkios, so run away. Don't allow yourself to maintain a position like that. Run away. You can't do work like this. So now we're getting into the TMI part. If they were meeting each other on the street and they would come belly to belly, their bellies were so enormous. That underneath their belly, there was a huge canopy because their legs were much further apart than their bellies. So have an ayil bakra de turi beinayu, a pair of cattle would be able to walk right through them. Could you imagine two oxen pulling a plow? Go walk right underneath their bellies. They wouldn't squeeze through. They would get through without even touching their legs. They must have been very tall as well, right? Because the bottom of their belly is like 6 feet up in the air. So they were huge people. So Amr Lahu, Hahim Matranisa. So some goyish fancy lady told him, B'nechem einam shalachem. Your children must all be mamzerim, because there's no way it's happening. I told you we're going to get into a very interesting Gemara today. I can tell you one thing. If our Meir Shapir would have known that I'm going to be a Daf Yomi Magid Shir, he for sure would have skipped this block. But let's get buckled up. Amr Lahem. They told him, you think we're fat? You should see our wives. Shalahen Gadol Mishalonu. They're even bigger than us. When we stand stomach to stomach, we have to speak long distance, right? Kol Shekain. So sagt die Gemara.
Aber nur Materialisten, weil die einzige Sache, was sind Trachtes und das.
Ja, eine Gedame. And we're soon going to see Ikadari Hachi Ka'amrila. There are those who say that this is how they responded to her. Kikiish Geburasai is big as a man is, that's how big is Ever Tashmish. So now we're getting very, very graphic. The Ritva doesn't learn like Rashi. The Ritva learns that they had very large limbs, but this is how it worked. Ikadami, the Marsha speaks out. Why would the Gemara get so graphic about very personal information on these Gedolei Le'olam? Zok the Gemara, when someone accuses someone that his children aren't kosher, then you got to lay it out on the table and make it very clear to prove the integrity of your children. So Avada, this is definitely not normal speak, but we're trying to establish our yichus. For there, unfortunately, we have to prove it clearly. When you have a loving relationship, you can work it out. Our women want us even more than we want. We can get the job done. Why would they even answer such a prosta question like Chaim spoke out? Don't answer, ignore when they're asking such nosy, inappropriate questions. And therefore you get even into big details. Okay, we'll stop here. We'll probably go back a little bit tomorrow because we don't want to miss any juicy detail of this very informative Gemara. Bez Hashem will be mamshech tomorrow for Pesach Shei. 6 o'clock.
I came 12 minutes late. Was gered Vater haben?
Yeah. Yeah. Shkoich. I don't know if it's B'Shem. I said B'Neder.